Yo, 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 what's up? Donnie Chocolate here. What's going on, class? Break is over. I'm here to tell you all about my beef with Martin Luther King Day, MLK Day. Now, one, I don't have any like inherent beef with the fact that we have an established day to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That is a great idea. But my beef began when I began researching more about who Martin Luther King was. One, it's very common for there to be an argument about the militancy of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam versus the passiveness of Martin Luther King and SNCC and more of the Southern organizations. Now, get this. This needs to be dispelled. Martin Luther King was not weak. Martin Luther King might have been a nonviolent activist, but he was also just as militant when it comes to changing the systems that we had in place that discriminated against black people specifically. But he also fought for all people. Dig that. You have to remember that. He's also doing this in the most dangerous places possible to be doing this type of activism, to be doing these displays, to be organizing, to be doing these marches. He's marching in the face of danger, of the most danger in this whole country. That's what he was doing. That is not a sign of a coward. That is not a sign of anybody weak or meek. Passive does not mean weak. All right? So I want you to kind of reframe that and understand that when it comes to Martin Luther King, right? Still not my that's not where my beef started. My beef started when I began reading the speeches of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And, it's amazing. He's always been a figure of mine that I've always admired. I remember I had this wood and like mirror placard that was um y'all probably hear some dogs barking, but that's okay. But this wooden mirror placard, and it had a like a picture of him, but on it also you could see the words of his "I Have a Dream" speech, which is an amazing speech. The "I Have a Dream" speech. So I was familiar with this speech, and in that speech, really emphasized kind of like this certain unity, right? That's really important. And I think that we should all strive to, right? He talked about, you know, colored kids and white kids being able to hold hands, being judged not by the color of their skin, but by the character that they possess. All these different things, all these different things that were really good, right? That's what I grew up with. That's what I grew up with in my heart, right? This bringer of peace, which he really was. And he strived to do so since the very last breath he took. So that was my beef. But when I began reading his other speeches, when I began learning the things that they don't teach you about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that's when my beef arose. This kind of started when I learned about his speech on Vietnam, right? His speech at Vietnam, or speech on Vietnam, was pretty pivotal, right? What was pivotal about this was he was already a nuisance, right? He already, was pushing the envelope, being for lack of a better term, a thorn in the side of kind of how things went, right? The status quo. But many people thought he crossed the line when he began speaking out against the war in Vietnam, specifically about how important it was to value their humanity just as much as our humanity here. I think specifically he spoke about a child in Vietnam is still uh, just as important as a child in Guatemala or a child here in the United States. That was too far. He was anti-war. He was anti-colonialism, right? These are some things that I started to learn about and actually learn what they really meant, right? The widespread machine of war that the US has spread across the globe, land and sea, and even air. This is what he was standing against. And this was so interesting to me because I feel like it was hidden when I began learning these things. And this was in college. And I began doing my own independent research. That's why you should do it. And I began listening to more and more of his speeches. And when I learned this, why don't people talk about this during MLK Day? Huh, it's really interesting. Why don't they talk about his work in Memphis before he passed? Another thing that I learned, kept learning about the anti his his okay. So I learned about his stance on Vietnam. Okay, it's like wasn't surprised. Not that I was surprised with this next one either, but he kept pressing forward. Right, the Civil Rights Act was not the bottom line. That was not the finish line for him. The Voting Rights Act was not the finish line, right? It was not the top of the hill. Great accomplishment, great move forward, but it was not where he wanted to stop. Okay, so we began talking about Vietnam. Then I started looking into his death, right? Um, oh, sorry, y'all, I'm getting over COVID actually. Ronies, whatever, I said it. Anyway, so he died in Memphis, the Lorraine Hotel, I believe. I was actually been fortunate enough to go there to its now museum, and see that spot. I don't want to get into conspiracies on this video, but I definitely got some on that one. Stay tuned. Maybe I'll do a video on that. What I really want to talk about is his work that he did with the sanitation union. He began creeping into another sacred system or another sacred area of the United States. He had already broken down the sacred barriers of segregation. And you better believe segregation, discrimination, and black people and native people being of lower class citizenship is foundational to this country. Foundational. There's no running away from that. Then he moved on. He started breaking into the sacred area of war. And war, again, is foundational to this country. Foundational. From the the tribes and the nations that already existed here to other foreign countries and invading them to all different types of just war. War is foundational to the United States. As we can see, we're involved in so many of them right now. Then he began to creep into what I might feel like is the highest form, sacred area of United States, and that's capitalism. He began not just demanding we can drink at the same water fountains, or go to the same schools, or sit at the same diners. He began demanding that we actually get our economic due, right? Go listen to his speeches on what America owes black people economically, right? He began organizing and working with unions, right? They began to fear him to be a socialist. But what they feared most is that their precious system, a system that lets the fat cats sit up top and have extreme inequality and allows people of select few billionaires, right, look down from their ivory towers and think they know the best. To allow this unequal share of the prosperity that people work for and work hard day in and day out. He began creeping into that. Now, all the while, I talked about these three sacred and foundational areas of the United States. That's racism, that's war, and that's capitalism, right? Capitalism, I say, which is the most important one. Those are those that's not just held by me, right? When you begin to look at uh, his critiques, he's champion now. Martin Luther King Jr. is champion now. He's championed, right? He has his own day. We all happy. We all hold hands and stuff, and that's all great and good. I'm not hating on holding hands and being happy. That's good that we can do that together because we are all humans on this earth. Cool. At the same time, you would not be on his side. Yeah, I'm challenging you to think about this. He was not liked. Even a lot of black folks were saying he was doing too much. He was making things worse for them, right? Would you really be on the side of Martin Luther King Jr.? Not this fluffy, cool, everybody loves him version that they have taken and manipulated, right? They've taken the realness of him, of his history and his works, out with this day and only shine a light on this nice, soft togetherness. Again, I'm not attacking togetherness, but I am attacking the fact that he was about systemic change. I'm attacking the fact that people sit here and champion his name and don't reflect on the fact that they would have not been on his side while things were going on. I'm challenging the notion that people sit up here today and don't think about being on the wrong side of history. And let me tell you, it's easy to be on the wrong side of history. It's comfortable to be on the wrong side of history. It really is. Just think about segregation and how easy it was to go along just to get along, right? I'm talking white folks, especially, way easy. Black folks is a little different. Maybe it's easy not to buck the system, but it does not mean an easy life at all, right? At the same time, these things were pivotal. Pe- Look, think about subjects, right? Those three subjects that I talked about that Martin Luther King stood against, right? Racism, war, capitalism. Where do you stand? Where do you stand with the conflicts that are going on around the world right now? What do you feel about Palestinian children? What do you feel about the houseless populations rising? Or is it just these individuals and coincidentally there's more individuals who are just lazy and don't want to work? Or is there a system involved? Is there an inherent and foundational principle that is flawed and a part of creating this inequity and this harm, this struggle, right? And most of all, is it even necessary? And if it is necessary, what is it necessary for? I hold Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with high esteem. Was he perfect? No, nobody is. At the same time, what he stood for and the things they don't tell you are most important to continuing to transform this country, to continue to push this country forward into what it should be, not what it once was. Because it was never, it never kept the promises that it promised in the Declarations of Independence, in our Constitution. It still hasn't upheld that. It hasn't repaid the debt that it owes the native folks and the native tribes and nations that existed here for generations. It hasn't paid back the debt to black America and black people who built this country on our backs. So, let us have an opportunity to unify. That's all good and dandy. But let's also take a moment to really think about how we push this country forward and how we make systemic change, foundational changes that will also impact people who will live after us, whether that be your children or your nieces and nephews or your cousins or your neighbors or your students. Let's remember what Martin Luther King was really about, and that was actualizing change. All right, class. Hope y'all enjoyed this one. I just wanted to, just give y'all a couple of words and give you some things to look into. Okay, I think that's really important. We talk about independent research. Don't just take my word for it. Go listen to his speeches. Go buy one of his books full of his speeches. Right? Go just Google Martin Luther King, MLK, and Vietnam. Google that. Google MLK and the Sanitation Union. Get you on YouTube right now. YouTube these things, right? YouTube his speeches. YouTube what he said, right? Do your research because Martin Luther King Jr. is so much more than the nicely wrapped with a bow on top of this, I don't know, this figure, right? That's so incomplete. That's so incomplete. So, again, class, thank you for listening. I appreciate y'all. Continue to do the work, continue to learn, raise awareness, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.